Scar is one of the iconic Disney villains who emerges during the Renaissance. This of the late 80s, the one that started with The Little Mermaid in 1989. Scar comes from a later entry in that time period, 1994's The Lion King, a movie that has at times been referred to as Hamlet with lions. While it's not a one-to-one adaptation, it shares many themes, which the directors Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff admit. Minkoff stated, oh that's right, quotes right off the bat, because The Lion King was considered an original story, there was always the need to anchor it to something familiar. When we first pitched the revised outline of the movie to Michael Eisner, Jeffrey, Peter Schneider, and Tom Schumacher, someone in the room announced that its themes and relationships were similar to Hamlet. Everyone responded favorably to the idea that we were doing something Shakesperean, so we continued to look for ways to model our film on that all-time classic. That made Scar our Claudius of this tale. The thing with the Disney villains of the Renaissance era is that they became quite iconic. They are some of the most loved and best remembered villains, boasting easily identifiable motivations, strong character designs, satisfying villain songs, and overall providing balance to the movies they were a part of. A counterpoint to the heroes of the movie, providing an ultimately satisfying presence for the heroes to overcome. Over time, there's been some pushback to the villains of this era. Some feel they are too simple or are loaded with problematic coding that makes the fact that they are villains questionable. And while this can be interesting conversations to have, for the most part, fondness has lingered for these villains. They've remained beloved by many, particularly with those who grew up during the Renaissance, and the company uses them as icons. Time will tell if Disney and these characters maintain that generational appeal. Having strong films with villains like these will help in that regard. It's different than when the villain is generational trauma, or internalized self-hatred brought on by poor parenting, or generational trauma. That's not to say such themes can't land with people, but there's something about having an actual villain to latch onto and to see defeated. It can be satisfying, and sometimes those bold, dichotomous archetypes work well, especially in a kid or family film. Now, you can find a way to strike a balance between theme and villain. It's more difficult when you pull it off. You get the wolf from Puss in Boots' Last Wish, and he's awesome.
Because Puss in Boots laughs in the face of death, right?
When you have an iconic character, they can escape the confines of the movie that they're in. They can be introduced and marketed a variety of ways. I'm wearing Scar nail polish today. There's Scar nail polish. It's called Long Live the King. That is bootleg, but Disney itself has a whole line of official villain merchandise. And it's easier to market characters like Scar than say it is Hans from Frozen. So it is in this vein that we're getting some Disney villain comics. They're being licensed out through Dynamite. The first in line is Scar, with the first issue released in April 2023, written by Chuck Brown with art by Trevor Fraley. The series will be a retelling of The Lion King, but from Scar's perspective/side. It's set to be a miniseries that runs 4 issues. And of course, it's Dynamite, so there are variants upon variants. There always are. I've done a variant cover with Dynamite, and it was a good time. Now, this Disney villains concept, it intrigued me. As established by the nail polish, I'm a person who's interested in things like that. However, I also felt that Scar would be one of the harder villains to pull this off with. Unlike, say, Maleficent, who's slated to be the next villain. She's a classic villain from the early days of Disney. There's much more room to maneuver with a character like her than with Scar. Not only is there a 16-year gap to play in before Maleficent finds Briar Rose, but her motivations were so vague and petty, which is why I loved them. Don't invite you to a party? Whole life ruined. However, that lack of specificity also gave Disney room to do things like use a rape allegory as motivation in their live-action films. It was possible because it was left open. Scar, by contrast, has a very understandable motivation, and it's pretty clear how he went about it. Some of the minute details may be missing, but the question is, does one want those filled in? / do they need to be, and can it be done in an entertaining way? Well, let's take a look at Disney villain Scar #1 and find out. Let's see how it starts off. The main cover is a good one, that roaring profile against a stark white background, showing off Scar's, well, Scar. We're Scar bros, him and I. So many people think I cut this in to be cool. No, I was just a very clumsy child. Do you want to know how he got those scars? Maybe they'll tell you, but not in issue 1. We open with lines from the movie.
Life's not fair, is it? See, I shall never be king.
So we're starting off right at the beginning of the movie. First, we hop to some wildebeest, discussing the nature of symbiotic relationships between them and the birds who ride them, explaining mutualism as a form of community, as a mother wildebeest tells her child they need to work together to survive. This, of course, will provide a thematic conflict with Scar, and perhaps an actual one, because him and this wildebeest mom get into it. But it's going to showcase and highlight the lack of balance that Scar has, and the type of environment he'll foster when he becomes king. Definitely not a community. See the sirens. The sirens are coming for Scar. Just let them do their thing. Wee woo, wee woo, wee woo, banana guard. And gone. Scar, meanwhile, is brooding over his earlier encounter with Mufasa, and he's gonna take it out on some wildebeests.
Perhaps you shouldn't turn your back on me.
Mama! Get away from my son! I'm sorry, Mama, but I don't reason with the weak. I consume them. Alas, I do not sound as cool as Jeremy Irons. I wish I did. So I just randomly chose peasants like yourself to have a worse day. Subtlety? Not in my Christian Minecraft server. Thema, the mother, starts a stampede and Scar gets caught in it and forced off a cliff, which I guess will be his inspo for how he deals with Mufasa later on. You wouldn't dare. It's not my herd's numbers that beat you, Scar. It was the love of my community. Something your dark heart will never know. Scar is knocked out and descends into a vision where he's beset by an overbearing Mufasa demanding he bow to him and his son, and he leaves him there to forge his own destiny. Meanwhile, since Scar has been unconscious for hours at this point, some buzzards appear. These are Crass and Kabir. They're new characters looking to take advantage of this situation. One of the things they do is call Scar a dark prince, which is great. You add the word dark in front of anything just as an adjective and you get at least plus 20 cool points. The Dark Whim Seeker. It's no secret that Scar hates King Mufasa. He'd challenge Scar for the throne, but after getting beaten, he'd have to change his name to Scars. So, how does royal gossip fill my belly? Kabir figures that if they can make Scar king, he'll be so unstable that he'll just leave a trail of death in his wake. I mean, he was about to kill Thema, rather Thema's child, out of spite. So they reason there'll be corpses galore and they'll never be hungry again. So basically the hyenas' motivation, only the hyenas were following Scar's lead and he was promising them they wouldn't want for anything. But here it's implied that it's the buzzards who want to set Scar up with the hyenas. If he lives, we take credit for saving him and help him become king, which will lead to full bellies. But we have to convince Scar we can bring something to the table. Yeah. We need muscle and numbers. The Bone Eaters. However, before they can do anything, they're shooed off by Rafiki, who takes Scar to his tree somehow. He's really good at dragging lions. He never misses gym day. Scar is still on his "How dare Simba exist" tirade. Tell me that I am not the wisest lion in all the land. Whoa, 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 whoa. This isn't the Evil Queen miniseries. Scar, you are brilliant and cunning, but you covet the throne and let jealousy and hate murk the waters of your soul. You are royalty, prince, but I fear your dark choices overshadow potential. Are you saying that I'm the villain? That was very on the nose. I guess we are saying that. The cover said so. Then let's do something about it. With you by my side, we could easily take Pride Rock. You know, there's it being an open secret that Scar hates his brother. Then there's just him actively trying to recruit people he could come into contact with to take him down. I hope Rafiki said something about this to Mufasa. Maybe he did. Mufasa just shrugged it off like, oh, that's Scar. Always trying to get people to overthrow me. Brotherhood. Rafiki refuses, so Scar leaves and this issue ends with the buzzards promising to continue on with their plan. A comic like this is going to have an uphill battle in a couple of ways. One is, as mentioned earlier, relevance. You're answering questions few people asked, so the answers had best be compelling. And in this case, so far they are not. From the first issue, you haven't come away with anything revelatory, and what is being added so far hasn't enhanced the main story, because that was already a well-oiled machine. If there were questions to be asked of the Lion King, how did Scar team up with the hyenas was low on the list. It's something that some may find interesting. The author Chuck Brown highlights some of his own concerns when he discussed this project. He stated, retelling the Lion King, specifically through Scar's perspective, is a unique challenge compared to Marvel heroes or classic literature, because of the emotional connection many people have to the story and Scar himself. For Marvel and DC Comics, most of the intense emotional connections are from comic fans, but the Lion King is a tale that has defined a generation, and its characters are beloved in their own right by comics, animation, and film fans. While Marvel characters and literary icons have their own rich histories, adapting a Disney story means tapping into a legacy that is both visually and emotionally triggering for many readers. He's not wrong in that people can have an intense connection to these characters, but the idea that it would be so strong they won't be afraid to maneuver is not the best starting point for a series to get off on. Not every villain needs a complex backstory or a sympathetic one. Some are fully formed even in their vagaries. Scar is a jealous sibling, and it twists him into an awful person, amplifying his already negative traits as what he desires plays into his weaknesses. The original characterization is strong. Scar is manipulative and cunning, yet sullen and immature. A poor leader whose greatest obstacle to his own happiness is himself. However, Brown highlights another element that made creating this work a bit difficult. This outside of triggering potential fans. He stated, reinterpreting such a beloved film and character was a bit intimidating. I know people love these characters and I wanted to do it right. I spent countless hours studying the source material and analyzing Scar's motivations, desires, and internal struggles. I also worked closely with my Dynamite editor, Nick Cosby, to ensure that my vision for Scar's story would align with the original narrative, while offering new insights into his character and Pride Rock. When one is working with a licensor, some are more hands-on than others. Disney is usually of the more hands-on variety. They don't like to stray too far from the original depictions. And even decades later, if they feel it's not on brand, they'll cancel it. Scrooge McDuck. This is different than, say, a character like Batman, who sometimes careers was to be given room to run wild and do things like bladder spasm and backhanding their wards across the face. But Disney tends to like its branding to remain consistent, so one wouldn't be able to veer too far outside the confines even if one wanted to. And that limits what you can do. Because even if one is imposing something that's too far beyond the pale, pale, it may be too far beyond the pale for the license holder. So Scar is not suddenly going to have a radically different origin in this, and it's not going to move outside of the film's timeline in any significant way. So there's even less room left to play than there was at the start, and one can just try and add little things or more depth. This is why we have those new characters of the Buzzards, and miles will vary on how that lands. In a way, Crass and Kabir take some of the bite out of Scar as a villain, turning him from a misguided, embittered schemer to a pawn himself. In a way, it makes the Buzzards the masterminds, and that makes the Dark Prince significantly less menacing. And Scar was already on the whiny and cowardly side of villainy, so his ability to influence and manipulate those around him was one of the few weapons he had in his arsenal. This seemingly chips away at that, even if it makes sense that others could play into his vanity in this way. Another factor at play is the art. As Brown mentions, there is a visual legacy to Scar, and the art here isn't quite on par with the rich animation style of the Lion King movie, which fairly or unfairly is what one is going to think of when they see that this is a Disney villain comic about Scar. The style utilized here is more loose and sketch-like on Scar himself. The artist is having fun with it though, especially with doing things like the knocked out vision sequence. He stated, "I want to be able to make the characters you know keep their iconic looks while also keeping them fresh and interesting for the story we're trying to tell. There are so many cool ideas in this story that need to be told in a specific way. With my approach, I'm taking a lot of what came before as foundation and building on top of that. I actually learned how to draw a line at a young age thanks to the original film, and it feels kind of surreal to be breathing life into something I drew so much inspiration from." Ultimately, issue 1 doesn't really add much to the Lion King lore, and what it does add has a take it or leave it kind of quality. And some of the dialogue is very on the nose.
Are you saying that I'm the villain?
Now this is gonna land for some. There is an audience out there for this. Diehards who collect anything associated with their favorite Disney film or villain. And you know what? There's no judgment here. None. Oh no, look, my daughter's got eyeshadow on Gaston. No one slays like Gaston. There's also potential it could be fun for younger readers, if they're really into The Lion King. It's certainly a stronger entry in the adding to the lore arena than Lion King 1.5, which turned many of the poignant moments in the first film into a joke. It's 4 issues, this was just the first one. So again, things could change. But it didn't get the hooks in me. Although if one's interested in the concept or collecting it, now you know. As for me, I'm gonna hold out for Maleficent in May. It's a fun idea, but I'm just not sure it works very well with Scar. But those are just my thoughts, and I wanna hear yours. Do you disagree? Do you think it's fun to add these little details in? Do you like the idea that Scar himself is having his own strings pulled? Is this going into your collection? Do you collect any Disney things? Or are you off that Disney brand? Do you like the idea of doing villain minis or villain series in general? Yes, I have lots of questions today, so please share your thoughts down below. And while you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some of our day spent discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.